New today, President Trump announcing he'll hold a press event at the White House Monday to address violent crime in the nation's capital. Both Trump and Vice President Vance in recent days claiming crime is rampant, despite the Metropolitan Police Department reporting a 26% drop in violent crime since this time last year. Joining us now for more is Rob D'Amico, former member of the FBI's hostage rescue team and MSNBC national security and intelligence analyst. Rob, welcome. So let's take a look at some of these numbers broken down for D.C. Robberies are down 28%. Homicides down 12%. Sexual abuse down nearly 50%. But look, Trump has already deployed more federal agents in the city, at least temporarily. So if this data from the Metro PD shows a significantly safer city now over last year, where's the Trump administration getting its information that things are getting worse?
Well, they're not, because it's not. It's a nationwide trend, and it's been going down steadily since COVID across the nation, especially the numbers that you just showed in D.C. It's not about the actual numbers that are going down. It's one story came out from that Doge person that had, an incident, and that happens even when crime's down. But it is also a way he has more control over federal agencies. So if you're putting more federal agencies around D.C., then you have more control over it. So it's not a numbers thing. It's not a fact thing. It's a control thing.
Okay, let's pivot to the purge of top FBI officials this week. The FBI Agents Association expressed concern over the dismissals of former acting director Brian Driscoll and the head of the Washington FBI field office, Steve Jensen, who helped oversee the investigation into the January 6th riot. These are well-respected men with decades of combined experience. You worked alongside Brian Driscoll at one point, so tell us about him and what his firing is going to do to morale inside the FBI.
Well, I know him by Driz. Driz is a legend after being made director, acting director when Kash Patel was getting confirmed. And that was even a mistake. Driz was supposed to be deputy director. Rob Kosane was supposed to be director. They did the press release and it was wrong, so they just kept it because they don't want to go back. But Driz is an unbelievable guy. He was at NCIS before the FBI. He made it down to the FBI's hostage rescue team after being in New York, where I knew him. And I was on HRT for a long time. He had just a stellar reputation on the team, a Medal of Valor and a Medal of basically honor in the FBI on two occasions, one for overseas operations, one for an incident that happened in New York State. But what caught the attention of the major FBI is when he was acting director, he kind of stood up to naming the agents that worked on the January 6th. He even said he was one of them because he was back in New York during that time and worked on it. So he made a claim where people were like, okay, we have some people that are really standing up for us and saying this isn't right. I think he survived that, though. I think what happened just recently, though, is one of the suspendables, an agent that was fired during the Biden administration, they called them the suspendables. The Republicans used them. They used them for their propaganda. And then they didn't bring them back. Everyone thought when Kash Patel was made director, he would bring them back into the Bureau, and he didn't. He left them all fired. But one of those agents talked about the case agent from Washington field office who was on the public corruption squad that was disbanded. He went from there and he started flying, because he was a pilot too, Kash Patel's G5. So he made an announcement on X saying, oh, this guy that was involved in the public corruption files looking at Trump is now flying the director. I think they were embarrassed. And I think other people basically said, you're going to fire him. That went down to Driz, who is assistant director of the Critical Incidents Response Group that owns the pilots. And Driz, from what I heard, wasn't going to fire him over it. He just kind of refused. And that's kind of the second hit where he's taken with the administration. And that's why he heard was recently let go. So I think it's catching up. Now, when you look back at the confirmation, Kash Patel said he wasn't going to do retribution firings. Either he believed that and he's being told to do these now, or he just said it to get through the confirmation. Either way, I think you have problems. You have either integrity or you have a moral compass that doesn't have you standing up saying, no, it's not right. So
potentially of that interview that Todd Blanche did with Ghislaine Maxwell just a few weeks ago.
So, Megan, what would your advice have been if you were a part of that Epstein strategy meeting? I mean, how can Trump dig himself out of this mess? And by the way, he thinks of himself as a marketing expert. Would he even be open to advice?
Well, it's hard to dig yourself out of something when you're so blatantly involved in it and tried to play this off as a hoax from the beginning. It's unclear to me why he let his base dig into this so much. I think that they are going to try to do everything they possibly can to turn the page. They've tried investigating Obama. Now they're doing a Russia meeting with Putin. Like, they are doing everything they can to try to turn the page. But the problem is, it's the base, including people in Congress, in the Oversight Committee, are asking people to and subpoenaing people to come testify. So this is just going to drag out longer. Those people are coming up to testify in October. This is months more of this just trickling out drip by drip. The best thing to have been is not do the big press conference at the beginning with those binders when they all stood there, and not to release a letter saying there were no files.
So, Dave, ABC News reports that Maxwell said nothing during her meeting with Todd Blanche that would be harmful to President Trump, adding the conversations were recorded and the administration is considering releasing transcripts. So what does this suggest to you? I mean, you thought the grand jury transcripts would never be released. How about these?
Oh, no, I think this will be released, at least in part, because it helps the president. The reason why they had this private meeting between the number 2 person at the DOJ and a convicted sex trafficker was because they wanted information about Democrats who were involved, and they wanted information that would exonerate Donald Trump. And it looks like Ghislaine Maxwell is playing ball. How do I know? Well, she got sent to a minimum security prison, a club fed, right after the interview. And there's a possibility of a pardon down the road. So they want this information out there. But again, that information, just like the grand jury transcripts, are not going to satisfy the ravenous base who have been promised that there's an Epstein list and there's an Epstein file, and so far have received neither.
You know, to that transfer point, Megan, how unusual is it that more than a week after Maxwell was moved, the White House has not provided details of who approved it, how she was moved, why she was moved? How unusual is that?
I mean, listening to the experts that deal with the Department of Prisons and the Bureau of Prisons, I think that it's probably very unusual. I just don't think that these things are made public because you don't have someone this high profile. You also know that people who are accused and convicted of sex offenses do not get to move to a minimum security prison where it's very white collar crime. This is not something that most people would have the benefit of getting. So I don't necessarily know that we've ever been in a situation like this to have it be unusual. I think the whole thing from start to finish and moving her is unusual because this is not something where these types of criminals go.
Michelle, has the White House ever addressed the survivors?
No, they have not. And it's something that the president has made clear he doesn't like talking about. You know, every time this is brought up, he often lashes out at the reporter who asked the question, saying, why are you still talking about it? The only time it has even sort of come up was when the president was questioned about his comments that he ended his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein because he said that Jeffrey Epstein took some of his employees, in his words, he said, stole them. And one of those employees, according to the president, was Virginia Giuffre, who is one of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. But the president over and over has said that he had no advanced knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. So far, this is a thing that the White House has not wanted to speak about.
Well, Megan, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley is pushing for a public hearing of the Oversight Committee to give survivors the opportunity to provide testimony if they wish to do so, saying, quote, if we are to hold powerful people to account, our investigation must center the voices they tried to silence. So the White House, can it force the White House to be more responsive to survivor perspectives now?
I don't think so. I think that you see a lot of survivors out in the media. I think you should see survivors if they would like to testify in front of Congress. If the Oversight Committee is subpoenaing people, they should also be allowed to give their testimony. At the center of this is a sex trafficking ring, and there are hundreds of victims. And I think we lose sight of that sometimes in the political back and forth. And I think that's the one thing that we cannot lose sight about. So I would ask reporters to keep asking the president about these survivors, because at the core of this is that it is them, and they are the ones that matter the most.
Last question quickly to you, Dave, because House Oversight Chair James Comer this week subpoenaed DOJ for the Epstein files, also subpoenaed documents from a list of high-profile figures, including Bill and Hillary Clinton, former attorneys general, but notably not Alex Acosta, Trump's former Secretary of Labor, who resigned in July 2019 when he felt Epstein had become a distraction for the first Trump presidency. What light can Acosta shed on this case?
Everything. I mean, the whole non-prosecution agreement was signed by Alex Acosta. The fact that Epstein didn't serve any time in federal prison, the feds came in and they reached a deal with Epstein to have him serve some time in local facilities, state facilities, pleading guilty to state charges. I've never heard of that, where the feds come in and they do a plea deal to plead guilty to state, not federal charges. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. It just shows that James Comer's list is not a serious one. That's why he didn't include Acosta. That's why he didn't include Trump. That's why he didn't include victims. But instead he has Hillary Clinton and James Comey and Robert Mueller. It's as if he took a list of Trump's enemies and threw darts at it to decide who to subpoena. The whole thing is just reeks of politics.
The public servants that Donald Trump has mistreated are getting revenge, both directly and indirectly. You see here, you've had this, and this has happened with this particular person, but also with other public servants that have been fired or forced to quit. If not, they'll be fired, or forced to quit because they refuse to do something immoral, unconstitutional, and perhaps criminal, potentially. You have all of these people coming out and defending them, saying, look, these are career non-partisan public servants. If they have any partisan beliefs, I don't know it, because I've worked with this person for X number of years, and in their job, they've always been, I'm here to do a job. Here's the terms of my job. I'm not here as a political appointee of Trump or Obama or Biden or Bush or Reagan or Clinton or whoever. I am here on behalf of the American people. You know, and that's who I serve until the day I'm out of the job. And Donald, in firing people like this, has done a couple things. One, he's united people against him in the civil service, right? Good, hardworking, nonpartisan people. So now there's animosity between the president, his top appointees, and the actual people hour to hour who do the job. But also, it ruins his credibility. Because when it comes to criminal investigations, who does and doesn't get investigated, when it comes to who gets released from prison, or who gets sent to a worse prison, a stricter prison, a not as nice prison, all this Ghislaine Maxwell stuff, all of this is connected to the fact that people do not trust Donald Trump's handling of day-to-day government decisions. Republicans made up conspiracy theories, but at the end of the day, and he was probably too lenient, Biden let Merrick Garland do what Merrick Garland was going to do. He left the independence of the DOJ to Merrick Garland. And he did not interfere, so that when charges were and were not brought, most people accepted that because it was independent. Trump has now created a situation where no matter what happens anywhere in the government, the revenge for the good public servants is that Donald will never have an easy sell.